Hello, Amanda, and welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I'm thrilled to have you, and I know that we're going to have a really lovely, fascinating, interesting conversation. But before we dive into that, would you mind just sharing a little bit about who you are and what you do, so that the listeners can understand more about you?
Sure. I always love this question because it takes a few minutes for me to fully explain it. But essentially, I do something unique where I can trans-channel a spirit. And what that means is that I can invite a spirit into my physical body to use my body as a vessel to transmit a message or a frequency. And so I came from the background of coaching. And so I decided to utilize this skill and combine it with my coaching. And the way I do that is I will have a client come to me with questions about their life. They're feeling stuck, they're feeling blocked in some way, or confused or curious about something. And I will invite their soul or their higher self into my body, and they can have a coaching session with their own soul. And so, what makes this different from just coaching generally, which is what I used to do, is that I have access to the client's unconscious awareness. And it's typically the unconscious that drives our actions in our life for the most part. And so when you're stuck or blocked in your life, or you're noticing that you're repeating cycles and patterns, it's because there's an unconscious belief system that's driving it. But it's really difficult to understand what that is because you don't know what you don't know. And so
Absolutely.
by channeling the spirit, I'm channeling their full level of consciousness with access to their unconscious awareness. And so it's brought right to the surface and can kind of accelerate the transformational process as a result.
Yeah. Now we before this podcast recording, you offered me a session so that I could experience this myself. And as somebody that is very into, I mean, I hunt down my stuff. I'm relentless with trying to pursue my head trash and clear it. So I'm always looking under all the nooks and crannies, in all the corners, under all the rocks. I'm like searching for it high and low all the time. And I get really frustrated when I know there is something that's getting in my way, that's blocking me, and I just don't know what it is. Because if only I knew what it was, I could then clear it and heal it and do what I needed to do. So the not knowing is deeply frustrating for me. And I also know that when I have worked with my clients, my ability to spot their hidden wounds is the game changer stuff. It's the stuff that, as you said, all of those unconscious, all that stuff that's unconscious is what's driving the show. Like the reason you're not achieving whatever or you're struggling with whatever is because of what's going on beneath the surface. So having insight, visibility, awareness, access to that is incredible. I think a lot of coaches, that's what they get. That's a lot of the value they bring. But I mean, you're bringing a whole new dimension to that. And I just want to start with saying I really appreciated the session that we had because I know that there are still some unhealed parts of me. Of course, I mean, there's always going to be that. I'm going to be on my deathbed saying that, right? But at the moment, I very much feel like I'm at a crux and there's something I feel is getting in the way. And so we had this session. So I just want to share a little bit with the listeners what that was like, because they might be listening to your intro thinking, what? This sounds crazy. What is this woman talking about? Or they might go, oh my God, that sounds amazing. What is that like? So wherever you are on the is she crazy or oh my God, book me a session now spectrum, let me just share a little bit about what my experience is like. And so, yeah, you took a little moment to connect to me in my spirit and my consciousness, and you had your eyes closed, and then it took about 10 seconds or so, 20 seconds, and then you kind of visibly shifted somewhat as I guess you put on my outfit, for want of a better word, snuggled into my consciousness, or my consciousness snuggled into you. And then, yeah, and then we had a conversation, which was quite nuts because I was talking to myself basically, which was really weird for me. So what was it like? I mean, what's it like having people's consciousness? Like that blows my mind. So talk a little bit about that.
That's a fantastic question. And it's going to be challenging for me to explain, but I'm going to try my best. So, just to give you just like a really full picture of what I go through when this happens, is before a session starts, I will get into meditation. Essentially, what I'm doing is I'm getting into a very relaxed trance state. Everyone has the ability to do this. I am not special. I just want to put that out there right now. I have just worked on it. And that's why I can do it easily. But everyone has the capacity to do this. It's just a matter of practice. And so I get into a deep meditation and I invite forward all of my spirit guides. I invite forward all the client spirit guides. And then I make the conscious intention to invite their soul directly into my body. And I do kind of feel a weird sensation when they enter. And it just kind of feels like I expand, almost like I inflate like a balloon. That's kind of what it feels like. And my consciousness kind of gets pushed backwards a little bit, and the client's consciousness comes forward. And so for me, it's very difficult to distinguish who's me and who's them, because both are kind of going on simultaneously inside of myself, but it's almost like I am kind of watching a show and watching it all unfold, but I'm having the client's thoughts in my head as it's happening. So it's a little tricky to understand that, but essentially I am feeling their energy. Every soul has its own frequency. It feels different. And so I'm feeling their energy inside of me. I'm receiving thoughts and images and an awareness that is not mine.
Mm.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I think I asked you before we did the session was, how much can you tell me? And I think one thing you said is that you're not going to tell me things that I shouldn't know or I'm not ready to hear. Is that right? Did I remember that correctly?
Not 100%.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. It's complicated. What is revealed. So what I probably meant by that was that the client dictates the session. And so things are not necessarily going to just be revealed unless the client asks about that specific thing, because there's an element of free choice here. And if someone doesn't want to discuss a specific topic in session, then I'm not just going to blurt it out and start talking about it. So the client gets to ask the questions, and that will dictate the direction of the session. And then some things will come to light that the client didn't necessarily know about. And so in that respect, I can't necessarily dictate how each session is going to go. They're all different, but it is a deeper level of awareness around the thing that the client brings up.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, and I'm very happy to be open about what came up in mine, because all of my podcasts is me sharing my own head trash and my own journey. So I'm not kind of precious about that. I think the more we can be open about our own head trash, our fears, our blocks, our wounds. I just want to destigmatize this, because we all have wounds. We've all got head trash. It's nothing to be ashamed of. So yeah, I just want to let you know that I'm happy for this to be an open, transparent conversation. And so one of the things that we kind of quickly dropped onto the theme of loss and fear of loss. And so for those listeners that remember my story, I lost my mum very suddenly to cancer when I was 30. So I have had this trauma it was very sudden. It was over like 7 or 8 weeks that suddenly, from knowing about it to her loss, that it happened. So it was very fast and difficult. And it really spun me out, as I'm sure a lot of people could appreciate. And so I've been healing this aspect for a long time. But what was very interesting is how the loss piece was tied into many other themes in my life. And also the other piece that I've also been wrestling with a lot with is fear. And I had tocophobia, the fear of pregnancy and birth. And it's birthed the whole brand and business for me called Fear-Free Childbirth, and my book, Fearless Birthing. So fear is at the root of a lot of my work, and women come to me to get rid of their fear. And here we had a theme come up in our session that combined fear and loss together, which is fear of losing what I have, which was very interesting. And what was fascinating for me afterwards, because since we had this session, which was about a week ago, I then went on to a big healing mission personally, and right, okay, I now know what I need to tackle. So I'm going to work on this. And when I was working through this, it was really interesting. And I noticed that I've had this pattern of losing what I have recurring so many times. It's just like a record that's just stuck in the same groove. It just seems to be, I have stuff, I lose it. I have it, I lose it. Whatever I have, I lose it. It's just, and it was mind blowing for me how this, and I had no awareness about that until this was brought up. So I think the reason I'm sharing this is, one, that these healing journeys can be so interesting and can really raise your level of self-awareness quite massively, but also give you these aha moments that can really help you. Like for me, I feel like I'm stuck in the loss groove, the losing what I have groove. I'm just stuck in that trajectory, but now I can leap out of it because one, I have awareness around that, but now I've done a lot of healing around it, and it's really not finished, and I have more to do. But goodness me, I'm in so much better position than I was, let's say, a week ago before we had that session. So I just want to openly thank you for that, Amanda, because that's huge for me.
No, thank you for sharing that. It's one very powerful realization to have, and then two, hella powerful to share that with others. And so I really honor your ability to do that and to be so openly vulnerable in that way. I think that, truthfully, I think a lot of us hold shame around parts of ourselves and parts of ourselves that we believe, shouldn't be there or should be different, or that we desire to change or not bear witness to, or not show to the world. And it is that rejection of the self and the shame around those parts of us that really holds us hostage and creates the unconscious motivations that keep us stuck. And it is only through sharing that we can create a sense of peace and acceptance around who we are and where we are in our lives. And that is where the true healing takes place. I believe that awareness is the first piece. And then after that comes acceptance. And with that, unconditional love for who we are, not who we desire to be, who we actually are in this very moment, and having the power to share who you are requires embracing who you are, and that is super powerful. And I really commend you for having the confidence and the courage to do that.
Now, with some of the clients you work with, when they have this level of self-awareness around maybe these aspects of their hidden self or their higher self that has now revealed itself, let's say, is that level of awareness enough to kind of lift let's say, talking about my repetitive groove that I'm stuck in, I have been, or whether or not I'm out of it now, time will tell. But is that level of self-awareness going to be enough to maybe lift them out of that repetitive pattern? Or in your experience, it's the beginning of a piece of work, it's the beginning of something, or both? Is it a bit of both? I don't know. What's your experience?
It's a great question. And it's different for everybody because we're all on our own path. We're all at a different place of readiness, and readiness to embrace who we are, readiness to do something new, and readiness to see our own truth. And again, what this comes down to is acceptance. The people who are able to hear their own truth reflected back to them and accept it, meaning not hold shame or judgment over it, are the ones that are ready to change. And that sometimes do and sometimes don't, just all in their own timing. The people who hear their truth reflected back to them and are upset by it, or who don't want to fully accept it or embrace it, those are the ones that need more time. Bad about either of these, it all comes down to timing, really. And it's really, awareness is brought up in the session, and the next step is acceptance. And it's only through acceptance of your own truth can you then change it. You can't change something from a place of resistance.
So when you're talking about acceptance, is it a little bit, because there's acceptance, but another way of expressing that might be sort of making peace with that part of yourself, so that you no longer no resistance, no shame, no hate towards that part of yourself, no wanting to deny that it's part of you, but embracing it, accepting it, and just making peace that is who you are. Is that, she's nodding for those that maybe.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, I think, we're brought up to believe that we need to change in order to be worthy. Become more educated, make more money, change how we look, change how we appear to others, date certain types of people, and that we're not good enough with just who we are. We have to become something other than what we are. And that becomes ingrained in our unconscious. And so without realizing it, we avoid aspects of who we are because we're ashamed of them. And that is how an unconscious pattern comes up, is that you resist a part of you because you don't like it. And rather than going away, it just seeps into your unconscious and then it runs your life. Whether you know it or not, it's always going to be there. That part of you doesn't go away because you pretend that it doesn't exist. And so it really comes down to owning who you are and finding peace inside of that. And then from that place, then you can create change. But it's much more difficult when you're fighting against aspects of who you are.
And do you think it's that acceptance piece, that whole piece we just described, is that then what leads to this shift in beliefs? Or do you think the belief change work is a separate kind of piece of work? Because I'm always trying to sometimes I go in and do belief change work, and a lot of coaches might hear this and go, oh yeah, this is, I talk about this a lot with the coaches. Do we, what comes first? What dictates the belief? Is the belief the thing that's at the top of the tree? Is it these aspects of ourselves that we have that are creating these beliefs in the first place? And therefore, when we heal that part, we make peace with that part, the beliefs that trickle down differently and therefore manifest differently. I mean, what's your understanding of the interplay between these different aspects of our being?
Such good questions. And again, I think it's different for everybody because we all have different perspectives, belief systems, and we're all kind of at odds with ourselves in different ways. And so different approaches work for different people, but there are different layers to this. So the first layer is the mental layer, like questioning your own thoughts and belief systems. Is this thing I'm believing actually really true for me? What is evidence that it's true? Like actual logistical, tangible evidence. Can I find any? If not, can I find evidence to the contrary? That's mindset work. That works wonders for me. I don't know why, it just really works for me. Then the deeper layer to that is emotionally. Can you sit with the feeling of shame or the feeling of fear and feel it? Because it's gonna be there. There's the thought, and then there's the emotion that accompanies the thought. And so sometimes learning to feel feelings that have been suppressed and repressed for a very long time is an important part of the healing journey, because if you're constantly in avoidance to a feeling, that further exacerbates the cycle of, whatever it is that you're running, that feeling that you're running from. And then there's the unconscious piece, right? Like uncovering the unconscious belief systems, bringing them into your awareness, and then doing the mindset work on them, and then feeling the feelings associated with them. And then there's the action component, taking different action. Because at the end of the day, a change in behavior is a change in action. And so can you take different action, which is going to bring all of this stuff back up again. And then the work starts all over again. So it's a constant cycle, but doesn't have to be hard, and it is helpful to have someone guide you through it, because it's difficult to see the forest through the trees. Yeah. But I think that all of these components are necessary in the healing journey, because we are thinking and feeling beings. And so you want to approach it from different sides. But for me, I'm a very emotional person, so feeling my feelings is not challenging. It's the mindset work that really did wonders for me. So everybody's different.
And also, I guess there's going to be some beliefs, and we talk about being worthy and am I worth it and am I deserving? These are kind of they're like the big guns, aren't they, in terms of beliefs? And then you got the other ones that am I good enough? Good enough is still one of the big ones, but sort of taking it in a more I can't think of another example now, but I'm thinking these big beliefs that a lot of people care a lot about. Like, am I good enough? Well, why does it matter that you're good enough? And we place a lot of importance on being good enough. And so you can be good enough at your job, or you can be good enough. I mean, how do you define good enough? That's the problem. Is you need to define this really clearly, because otherwise you're never going to be good enough. You're always going to think of something that you're not. I'm not good enough at singing, but I'm not trying to win X Factor. So it doesn't really matter. Whereas, am I good enough at what I do for my work? Well, yes, I need to be that, because that's how I'm trying to earn my money. So there are going to be aspects of your being that matter whether you're good enough, that matter whether you're worthy. But unfortunately, I think we just kind of just use the same brush on all of it. And is the key whether it matters, and why do we make it matter? What do you think? Or is there a fundamental need deep within us to be worthy? What are your thoughts?
These are such powerful questions. And where I would go with this is, understanding what you're really desiring. At the end of the day, you want what you want because you're under the belief system that it's going to offer you a different experience, a different feeling. So, for example, you want to go on vacation because you believe that the vacation is going to provide you a feeling of peace. And the reason why you believe that the vacation is going to give you peace is because you believe that peace is not accessible for you when you're not on vacation. Therefore, you're operating under the misunderstanding that peace is only available to you in a different reality. So what you really want is peace. And what this comes down to is that you don't understand how to open up to the peace that's already available to you. And so when you're saying, I'm not good enough, what you really want to feel is love within yourself, from yourself, to feel safe inside of who you are. And you're believing that changing who you are is going to allow you to access that feeling. And that's a misunderstanding. The feeling of feeling love for yourself, feeling safe inside of yourself is already available to you. But we have been taught the opposite. We have been taught that you have to change something about yourself in order to achieve that feeling inside. But what this actually leads to is a constant chasing and searching for your entire life. It's never good enough because the narrative that you're operating underneath it all is, I'm not good enough just as I am. I'm not enough just as I am. And so it doesn't matter how much you accomplish, achieve, or change. You're always going to feel that way. And so it comes down to, and some of these thoughts are very subtle. Sometimes you don't know what your thoughts are until someone underlines it for you. Like, here's what this is. And then a lot of the time you'll see it and you'll be like, I don't think that. And then after a few days, you realize, oh, wait, no, I do. Like there's like an unraveling process there because it's so unconscious. But I think that like we've been talking about, awareness of what those thoughts are really comes first. And then from there, you can start to question them. And then once you question them, then you can start to feel, what does it feel like to feel worthy inside of myself without doing anything, without changing anything.
But a lot of people have no idea, like they've never had it, will they? So
we're not taught this, which is crazy, right?
Yeah.
We're not taught how to do this. And so you have to learn.
Yeah. And what the other thing is some of these feelings that we might have, our need to seek this out can be very powerful and propelling. Those that it could be what drives the entrepreneur to become a tech billionaire, or it could be, it's what gets you out of bed in the morning to prove to the world that you can do whatever it is you want to do. And maybe there's a part of us that wants that because it powers the machine. And once you take that away, you're like, well, I'm worth it. I don't have to do anything. I can just sit around and just be at peace in my lounge.
I love that, because I think that that's what people believe, is that, oh, if I'm feeling like I'm worthy inside of myself, then I'll become complacent. And then I won't have the motivation and the drive for the thing that I want. But that's not true. It's actually the opposite. How many of you have desperately wanted to lose weight, and the way that you motivate yourself to lose weight is to pick at yourself and all the things about yourself that you hate? Does it work? How is that enjoyable? That process becomes so unenjoyable and so challenging and so difficult that most of the time it leads to this yo-yo effect of weight loss, weight gain. And so I think that the reframe is that if I'm feeling good inside of myself, how will I take action differently than I have been in the past? It will come from a more confident place. I will feel more motivated. I will have more energy. I will put myself out there in new ways that I wouldn't have had the confidence to do before. And so the reality is actually the opposite. You become more capable of what you want. Maybe what you want changes. Maybe you don't want the same thing that you did before because you realize that it's not as important. But at the end of the day, you feel better inside of yourself, which is ultimately what you want. You've just been operating under the understanding that the goal is going to give you what you want. But that's what we've uncovered is not actually the case.
Yeah. And so what's powering your motivation is it's just coming from a more honest, authentic place that will ultimately ensure that you're aligned with who you are, rather than you find that you've been chasing this dream. Like we hear a lot of people that have got a lot of wealth, they've now got the car and the house and the second home and the blah, 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 and they're still not happy. You know, they found all the things they thought they wanted, but they still don't feel it inside. And so it's finding this alignment where you're going to be happy the whole time without having to kind of put it at some point in the future. Now,
Exactly.
okay, so the other bit that came to me when you were saying all that is that, you know, you solve things differently, you look at it differently, you see new perspectives when you're in that place where you're coming at it from this more aligned place. And immediately I was thinking about you're coming at it from a new level of consciousness almost. And we had a conversation around consciousness before. And also at the beginning of this conversation, you said, you know, you slip on somebody's consciousness. And so I really want to talk about this a little bit more, because I'd love to get your perspective on how you define consciousness with your unique insight into it, the way that you kind of try other people's on for size. You know, I'm stuck with mine. I haven't tried somebody else's on. So I don't know what it's, you know, I don't know what that's like to change and put something. So what's your unique perspective on consciousness? How would you explain it to somebody what it is?
I define consciousness as the level of perspective that you have of yourself and the world around you. That's really what it is. And we are limited by our own perspective, your own thoughts, your own belief systems, how you see the world, what you've been taught growing up. Formulate your worldview, and that becomes your perspective, and that is your conscious awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And when you can see things from a new vantage point, see things from a new perspective, it offers you a different lens through which to see yourself and the world around you. And so that becomes the element of play within our ability to shift our own consciousness, is to be able to see ourselves and the world around us from different perspectives.
And there's a tool that maybe some of the listeners have heard of, maybe you heard of, which is called the Map of Consciousness by Dr. David R Hawkins. And for those that aren't familiar with it, if you've ever heard people talking about low frequency emotions like shame, fear, guilt, or pride or anger, and then high frequency emotions like bliss and joy and compassion. And often there's lots of memes going around on social media with some graphics to go with this kind of chart. And you see them all stacked up and going from the low to the high. This is a really interesting tool that I've become aware of, and I've done some podcasts about this already for those that are interested in hearing more about it. But you know, one thing that he talks about a lot is those that are at a lower form of consciousness, which he defines with numbers. So he says that the map of consciousness algorithm starts at 1, which is a sign of consciousness, up to 1,000, which is where Jesus or Buddha, their level of consciousness are at, which is sort of above enlightenment, which I don't think many of us might aspire to that kind of level. We'd be quite happy with inner peace, I think. So therefore, the lower levels, according to him, is like, it's full of these lower emotions like fear and anger and shame. And so I'm just wondering, like, when you work with people and you have somebody else's consciousness come in you, do you really feel that kind of those emotions as they come in? Does that feel different to you when you kind of have something like that within you?
What I've learned is that there's a very big distinction between the human perspective and the soul perspective. And the biggest thing that I've learned from channeling people's higher selves, channeling my own, talking to my spirit guides, talking to ascended masters and archangels, whom we look up to with reverence because we believe that they have this, oh, they must be so smart and so intelligent. And so we see it as better than, right? It creates almost this hierarchical level of thinking where if I can expand my level of conscious awareness, I will be better than I am now. And that comes back to our previous conversation. A different reality than the one I'm currently residing in is different and therefore better, right? I will feel better. I will be more aware. I will be more at peace when. But that's not necessarily true. And the purpose in coming here from the soul perspective is to experience yourself in this lifetime, in this version of you, not to necessarily understand yourself more, but to just experience you. And you, like this version of you, you don't have to change yourself. you just, just embody who you are and experience you for who you are. And if you do happen to have a better understanding of that as time goes by, great. But your soul doesn't really have a vested interest in one over the other, because your soul doesn't see things in good, bad, better, worse, ahead, behind, success, failure. It's just what is. There's only the now. And so I think that the full spectrum of consciousness isn't fully accessed until the lifetime is over anyway. And it just comes back to perspective. Like when you're on the other side, you have a different perspective than you do now. And that doesn't make the human experience one that is less than or not ideal. It's just different. And so I don't even know if I'm answering your question. I kind of went on a tangent there, but my perspective, coming back to my perspective of what I've learned, is that the soul wants you to know that there are no expectations placed on you in this experience. There aren't any. Your soul loves you just as you are. And if you want to understand yourself better and to heal your trauma, like that's fantastic. But if you don't, like your soul is just going to be just as happy regardless of what you do. And so you're loved completely unconditionally.
But are you loved by your soul? Is that what you're saying? Or loved by your soul, or loved by things outside of us? Like, not, there's no separation. So I'm already getting myself in tangles there already.
Yeah.
But well, there's love already there.
I think that comes back to what this human experience requires of us, which is a separation of self, right? We are separated in a couple different ways. We're separated from unity consciousness, and we are also separated from our own consciousness, because there's only a small part of your consciousness that is experience. And so you are sensing a separation, and you are also, inhabiting a human body, and this human body has an ego, and the ego senses that whatever's outside of you can be a threat. And so it protects and defends itself. And what we have been taught is that when we are feeling threatened, that means that we have to change who we are to feel better. And so it just the cycle kind of repeats itself, where the illusion of the experience is the separation. And our ego is telling us that when we are separate from the things outside of us, that we have to protect who we are. And the way to feel better about who we are is through more education, feeling more successful, getting a better job, whatever. But that's all part of the illusion of the experience. The reality is that you are enough just as you are. You don't have to change anything. And that is the soul perspective versus the human perspective. And one is not better than the other. They're just different. It's just a different conscious awareness, which is kind of the whole point.
So what about learning? Because maybe we're not here to do things better, but what about to learn lessons? There's a lot of people that think they've been, given these lessons to conquer in this lifetime, and that's the soul's mission, is to learn the lesson. And if you don't learn the lesson, you'll be faced with this over and over again. And maybe I could take on that view with my own learnings, of my own experience of repeating these, losing what I have. Maybe there's a lesson there that I haven't been learning. I don't know. But what's your view on lessons and soul lessons, and having to get to learn a lesson or experience a thing because of the soul's contract?
I think the lesson comes from the experience of it. And that's kind of what gets missed, is that it's not necessarily about, well, what does this teach me? It's about, what does this feel like? What does forgiveness feel like? How do I access that? What is stopping me from accessing it? What does it feel like to resist it? What does it feel like to embrace it? And that is kind of the nuance that I'm learning through channeling, is that it's the experience of the thing that provides the learning of it, and not just the learning itself. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, and as you say that, I'm just going back to the session that I had with you. So the repeated experience that I've been having is losing what I have. And so in the context of using that as an example, could the lesson be, well, I haven't been fully feeling that, or maybe I need to lose what I have in order to maybe rely and surrender to others around me, and I've just been fiercely independent, go, no, I'm fine. And then maybe I need to feel that total surrender. And so it's the feeling. So to try and navigate this, and I'm just using my example to help us get our head around these very nuanced, these nuances, is that what, like maybe it's in making me feel these things, and I've been resisting feeling them. And so until I truly feel them, I'm going to keep getting whooped around the face with this one.
I think so. I
Oh,
think so.
thank you for
I
letting me know.
I think, yeah, and I want you to know that it's so universal. Like, who wants to experience loss? You know, that's a really, really challenging thing to have to sit and feel. And especially from I'm going to get emotional, especially from the human perspective, where loss, especially of a loved one, can feel very definite, you know, like they're no longer there.
Mm,
That's a really, really tough one. And like, and I think that that's where the compassion for yourself is really comes in, is can you let yourself kind of grapple with that for a while? Can you let yourself be in resistance to it until you're ready to feel what needs to be felt? Like there's a
mm,
process there. And I do think part of it is that, again, we've been taught that some emotions are not good to feel.
mm,
You know, sometimes when you're little, you know, and I can speak from my own experience where I had guardians tell me, you know, stop crying, you know, just be happy, everything's fine. And so you learn to not embrace certain experiences, only the good ones, only be happy, only be excited. That's what's acceptable. And so it's just, you know, rewiring that for yourself where it's okay to feel lonely. It's
mm,
okay to feel shame. It's not
mm.
comfortable, but it's okay. And it can become more comfortable in time.
So by embracing some of those darker, I would say darker emotions, because they're the ones that make us feel dark and heavy and sad, or whatever, emotional, whatever we want to, you know, feel like you want to be in a dark room, or whatever it is. That's why I'm using that word. And so just feeling these, what I'm hearing for you is it's all about the feeling and the experience. So if we can experience what these experiences are making us experience and not resist them, just kind of move through them, then that's more likely to lead to maybe the lesson being ticked off that list, possibly. Now I revert back to humanness.
No,
Sorry.
no, no. And it's so beautiful. I think that the fear with what I'm saying is that people will be like, well, if I open up to feeling this, it's never going to end. And I'm going to get sucked down to this dark spiral of depression. And that's actually another misunderstanding where it's your resistance to the experience that keeps you stuck inside of it. And if you're truly allowing yourself to feel something, it actually passes in about 90 seconds.
Mm,
But the longer you're in resistance to it, like once you open the floodgates, it might feel a little bit overwhelming, but then it passes.
mm,
And then you feel actually lighter afterwards.
mm,
And so tiptoeing in, if it's new for you and if you're a little scared, is completely normal and natural and okay.
mm. I think a lot of people think about maybe going there. A lot of people describe to me, well, that's like Pandora's box, and I don't really want to open that. And I prefer the metaphor of a shaken bottle of Coke. They're like, no, I'm not going to open that right now. I'm going to wait for that one to calm down before I even go near it. And actually, most of our traumas or Pandora's boxes or whatever you want to call them, they're not always going to explode in our faces like that shaken bottle of Coke. They might just, if you just do it slowly, it just, and then before you know it can come out slowly. It doesn't have to be messy and teary. It could be, and that's okay. But it doesn't mean that you're going to sink into this pit of depression and never come out.
Right,
You know, I think that's what a
exactly.
lot of people are worried about. And maybe they've had those experiences where it felt like they couldn't get out. And maybe, like you say, it's because they were in there and fighting it the whole time rather than
That's
moving
it.
through it.
It's the shame or judgment of the experience that keeps you in it.
Mm,
It's like, oh, I wish this would end. I wish I didn't feel this way. Why am I such a loser? Like whatever those thoughts are, my life would be better if other people don't have to deal with that. It's those thoughts that are keeping you trapped. It's not the sadness itself.
mm. That's a mic drop right there for anybody listening, because that's just crystallizing that for people, I think, is really key. And that's the bit that that's head trash, basically. All those little things that run around in your head, that's the stuff that we just need to get rid of, because that's the stuff that's keeping you tethered to these lower states of consciousness, these
Yeah.
lower states of emotions. Now, one of the things you said to me during our session as well was you have enormous power within you. You have to, like there's power within you and you need to let it out. I can't remember what the exact words were, but that kind of thing. And at the time I was like, well, I'm sure all souls tell their humans this. Isn't this like just a regular soul human conversation? Like, and I'm sure it is. And I don't know, this sense of power that we have within us. We hear a lot of spiritual leaders talking about, we all are powerful beings, powerful innate beings. And this sense of power. And I just would like to maybe get your view on how do you explain what do you mean by that power exactly? What does that look like when we unleash this power? Because some people, they're scared of it because it's too formidable. It could be, oh my goodness, it's like that shaken bottle of Coke again. I'm just going to get it all explode in my face and it's too much. And I'm too much. And so how do you articulate, what is this power that we speak of in spiritual circles?
Well, what they're afraid of is not their power. What they're afraid of is their limiting belief associated with their power. So people are going to reject me. I'm going to lose everything, or it's not going to work out for me in the way that I wanted, or I'm going to find out that it's not possible for me after all, or that the power doesn't actually exist. So it's not the power itself. It's all of these other belief systems associated with the power that they're actually afraid of. I can't speak for anyone else, but my perspective on this is when they talk about power, it is your potential to create your reality. And that means internally and there's two realities. One is internal and one is external. So you can create whatever internal reality you want. So what do you want to feel? Like peace, like pure peace. You can create that experience for yourself any time you want to. We're just under the belief system that we have to change something to access it, but that's not true. And then the other thing that we have potential with is to create our physical reality. So you can literally live the life that you want. You have the potential to do that. We just have to overcome a lot of our own perceived limitations associated with that. But at the end of the day, they're all illusion. And so I think part of coming here is the process of remembering how powerful you are in your potential to create your reality, both internal, which is the first step. People think that I have to change my external reality and then I can access a feeling. It's actually the opposite. I'm going to access the feeling, and that's going to create the energetic kind of vortex that's going to allow me to manifest what I want in the physical.
I think one thing that when somebody described this recently, I can't remember when I saw it, but it just made it, because I'd heard this the law of attraction, we've all heard this so many times, right? You just have to kind of imagine in it, visualize, and then it'll show up. But I that's the abridged version. But essentially, if we just take it down to human terms again, excuse me, battling a bit of the cold. You think about somebody who's designing a bridge or a home. The beginnings of that will start in their head. They will imagine that, and then they will draw it and then take sketches. But it never starts on the paper first. It never starts as a brick and a pile of bricks and whatever. It always starts in the head before it even makes it to the paper. And this is exactly what that creation process is all about. Everything starts inside. It's your power to visualize and imagine, and then bring that forth into matter. I want to switch back to consciousness, because one of the things that I've been very interested since discovering the tool, the map of consciousness, is tracking my own shift in my own consciousness and my own changing of consciousness. And so I've been using the map of consciousness tool by R Hawkins to take a numbers reading, because my background's business and I like numbers. I get very excited about being able to track my healing progress. And so for anybody listening, check out the other podcast episode on this very topic. And I'd just be interested to get your view on this as someone that has a lot more experience and exposure to consciousness than I do. Like, what is your view on the idea of, do you think consciousness can shift and therefore change like that over a lifetime significantly? Is measuring it with numbers something that's worthwhile? What are your thoughts around this endeavor of measuring our progress with our healing using something like the map of consciousness?
First of all, I just want to say that I don't have more experience than you. I don't. It's just a different one, one. I think that there's nothing wrong with tracking things. Oh, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, you froze for a second. I think that there's nothing wrong with tracking things. And I think if tracking something creates a sense of excitement inside of you and it feels aligned, it feels motivating, then by all means, I mean that, and that goes for everything. I think it's important always with everything you're doing to understand the deeper desire underneath it. Am I tracking this thing because I'm afraid if I stop tracking this thing, then I won't see the improvement or it won't be
Mm.
worthwhile? You know what I mean? And
Like, is
so,
it with judgment? Is that what you mean?
yeah,
On
yeah.
judgment.
So just making sure that you're understanding why you're doing certain things, where it's really coming from. Is it coming from this
Mm.
feeling of lack, fear, insecurity, or is it coming from this feeling of like it's feeling in aligned and inspired?
Mm.
I think that for me personally, math terrifies me and it always has. So I am not someone that tracks much of my things. And in some aspects, I really have to get better at that. For me, the way I go about tracking change within myself is through witnessing how I show up differently in my life. So things that used to really piss me off, where I had a really short fuse, I tend to be more relaxed about now. Or coming and doing a podcast with somebody would have terrified me a few years ago. And now I have the confidence to show up and do it. You know what I mean? Or how I feel day to day in my life. I used to feel like I was a victim to my circumstances, that nothing was ever going to change for me, that I was pretty worthless and that I didn't have any, skills or all of those thoughts and feelings, I've been able to shed them. And so I've seen a change into myself, and that's sort of how I've been tracking it.
Mm.
And then when it comes back to the bigger picture, again, I think that the desire to increase one's level of consciousness is totally fine and good. And it can be super exciting to be able to have access to new awareness that you didn't have before. But the soul doesn't expect you to. You know what
Mm.
I mean? Like it's okay if you want that, and the soul, your soul and your God, your spirit guides will support you in that, but it's not a requirement.
Mm. Yeah. And I agree with everything you said. I think it needs, again, with anything that you're looking to achieve in your life, it's what's driving that. It's where is that coming from? And I think, and you go back to the weight, wanting to lose weight. Why do you get on the scales? Is it because you're going to start judging yourself and, oh my goodness, I shouldn't have eaten that cake, and oh my God, I must have got to stop drinking the wine now, and all of that? Or is it, oh, I wonder where I am today? Oh, that's interesting. I walked the dog loads last week, so that's made a difference. That's a very different response to the same kind of activity than the person that's judging where they're at. And so I think this is place of acceptance, which is what you were talking about before. It's like curiosity, acceptance, peace, and engaging with whatever measuring metric, whether it's weighing yourself or maybe measuring your consciousness, whatever that might be, and coming at it without this neediness of needing more, or no neediness and more acceptance. Is that, you're nodding lots
100%.
there,
You
Amanda?
nailed it. You nailed it. I feel like we're on the same page. Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, as somebody that's helped people bring about shifts, what I've appreciated in being able to do that is be able to demonstrate to somebody else, look, we've shifted in this way through the work that we've done together, that we've brought about a change. Because one thing I've noticed with people I work with, they don't always notice some of those changes. It takes somebody with high level of self-awareness over time to spot something. And also it might take a moment. It might take a few weeks to unfold, or months, for you to come across another situation in your life where you're like, oh, well, that's interesting. I've just responded to that differently. But the last time I experienced this was 6 months ago. So, if you've been working with somebody, a therapist or whatever, and you need to wait for that experience to roll around again for you to see how you're responding differently to life. Whereas there might be another way for you to find out whether or not you have shifted. And therefore, if you're in a different place, and you will pick this stuff up. I think those with high levels of self-awareness will be able to do that. But I think at the beginning of our healing journey, or when we're kind of muddling through at the early stages, that self-awareness isn't always there. consistently, or we don't always trust it because we're like, well, no, because we don't trust ourselves at those levels. And so some of these things mean that it can be difficult for us to reflect on our own progress. And I think it's really important for us to be able to make a call as to whether we are making progress. Because I think when you're in those lower levels of consciousness, well, you're wrestling with anxiety, severe anxiety or depression, it can feel like you're not moving forward at all because you still feel really crap. Whereas actually you've probably moved forward a ton. And so to get something that says, hey, no, you have, look at the numbers you have. Oh, really? I've noticed that really helps my clients to kind of keep going. And so, yeah, I think it's like you said, we've got to use it carefully, be mindful of how we're doing something like that, and take away judgment and bring it more acceptance into it.
Yeah. Finding evidence for your own progress is always important and helpful. And it's just a matter of you have an element of detachment.
Yes.
Right? Which is kind of the hardest part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that detachment, it's like you've got to make it not matter, which is what I was saying earlier about, does it matter that you're not good enough at one thing, but another, like it's this detachment that we need to bring to a lot of things, which helps us navigate things more easily. But that's really hard, isn't it?
Yeah. That's where the acceptance piece really comes in. And it's a process for everybody. I worked with a coach one-on-one for a year and a half. And I would say in the last like 4 months, did I really start to kind of be like, oh, I'm really attached to this thing. Like, that's why I'm so miserable. And then it became another few months to release my death grip over it. Like, there's a process here. And so to be patient with yourself.
One thing I've got to ask you, Amanda, is past lives. Do you get a sense of past life stuff coming in for souls needing to wrestle with in these lifetimes?
There was one instance during yours where I got this weird knowing that there's like a Palladian. I don't know if you've been told that before or if you're aware of the. Okay, I get the sense that there's like a Palladian connection, but then the conversation kind of veered in a different direction and it never came up, and I didn't have a chance to just tell you this. But that might be worth looking into for you. For these higher self sessions, it tends to focus more on the current lifetime because people want to work through whatever's currently happening for them. But there is opportunity to ask questions about past lifetimes. I find that it tends to not necessarily lead to anything new, and that whatever you're currently going through is all the information that you're kind of looking for or needing. But yeah, that information can be available to answer your question.
Yeah. And I'm just wondering, like, one thing, as I've been getting more into healing traumas and micro traumas, so I take a theme-based approach to healing trauma rather than event-based. So rather than going for big, scary traumas, just picking out themes. So mine is the loss theme, let's say. And so really gathering any experience that might be slightly tinged with loss. And so one thing I've been doing is also picking up and healing the traumas that come from our time in utero, past life, ancestral trauma, which I think is things that we're kind of, most people would readily accept that they've got past life traumas. Ancestral traumas, definitely, we know that one for sure. Past life is still, some people are like, not sure about past life. But you mentioned Pleiadian, and one thing that I've been picking up on a lot recently, which I've now coined the term galactic trauma, is traumas we've experienced in other realms or dimensions or times or planets. Because I've had clients asking me, can you pick up on any traumas I've had on other planets? So what do you know about galactic trauma? Is this a thing that you pick up on as well?
I do think that the soul kind of repeats cycles. And I get the sense that you were a healer in your Palladian life or lives, and that you're kind of embodying that version of you now in this lifetime too, because you are a healer, and that through your experience of loss in this lifetime, you will be able to help others work through theirs. But you have to work through yours first to fully know how to guide someone else through theirs. And there's like an aspect of give and take with this. And yes, we do experience trauma in other lifetimes that we might have a soul memory of. But I think that there's an aspect of whatever wasn't fully addressed or worked through at that time, sometimes you want to come back to work through it again. So it's not necessarily that you're trying to heal a past trauma, it's that you are looking to experience it in a way that you didn't give yourself permission to or have access to before, because that's ultimately what you want, is to experience it. And the availability to experience it through a new lens, right? You want to experience, let's take loss, for example. Your soul wants to experience loss in all the different variations that you can experience it to get the full picture, right? And
I've had that one.
That's, I think, where this is coming from. It's not that you have like karma that you have to tie up. It's that your soul's looking to experience loss in a new way.
And so we see a lot of people, hear a lot of people talking about witch wounds, for example, a lot of women that struggle with visibility or speaking up or being authentic, because, and then a lot of people go, oh, that's the witch wound. Is this something that you hear a lot of, that you see a lot of evidence for, or what are your thoughts on the witch wound?
Sure. I think that again, like the soul might have a specific intention for coming into this lifetime, where the witch wound, which is just an incident that happened in a past lifetime where you were not given the ability to speak your truth or to show up as your full authentic self, where you want to come into a different lifetime and have the experience to do that. And so the fear associated with doing that, you might remember from a past experience. And so you are being given an opportunity to try it again this time. And you're not going to fail if you make the decision not to, it's okay. It's just an opportunity. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, Amanda, I think we need to wrap up now, because otherwise we could just talk forever, and I'd rather just like draw a line under it while we're getting ahead of ourselves. So I just want to thank you so much for the time that we had together last week, but also for the wisdom and like the perspectives that you shared with us today. Now, if anybody wants to kind of hunt you down and get one of these like crazy higher self sessions with you, not crazy, it was wonderful. Where can they track you down? Where are you online?
Yeah, I really appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for having me and giving me this opportunity. My website, Amanda Lauren Blau. My last name is spelled B as in Bob, L as in Larry, AU, AmandaLaurenBlau.com is where all my stuff is. I'm pretty active on Instagram at Amanda Lauren Blau and on YouTube at Amanda Lauren Blau.
Wonderful. Well, I'm going to have all the links below this interview and also in the show notes on the Clear Your Head Trash website. Okay, thank you, Amanda. It's been fab.